You can go right now and find them. There's only a couple places in the entire Bible where the expression morning star is used. And by the way, when it talks about Lucifer, that doesn't exactly call him a morning star. It's a little bit different phrase in Hebrew. I'm going to really shock you with this too if you didn't already know it, but Lucifer is not even in the Bible. The word Lucifer is a Latin word that the translator Jerome added. It's not a Hebrew word. When people read that and it says Lucifer, there's no name Lucifer in the scripture. There's a name under there, but it's not the title Lucifer. Lucifer is a Latin word, which is very strange how it got transliterated and translated both forward. When they translated the Bible, they just took it out of Jerome's Vulgate translation of the Bible, where he was translating from the Hebrew into Latin for the first major Bibles that the Roman Catholic Church used. And when he did that, he translated this phrase, Hillel ben Shachar, as Lucifer, son of the morning. How art thou fallen from heaven in Isaiah 14:12, O Lucifer. See, that's pretty bad when I can't quote that anymore. I can't quote it because I think of it in the Hebrew, because that word Lucifer does not belong in the Bible. It's not a name for Satan. It's something invented by a translator. What it actually says there is Hillel ben Shachar, which is a title. It means shining one, son of the morning, or son of the dawn. It's a descriptive title for this being. Now, there are definitely some, including some who even believe in the devil in the same way I do, who don't believe this is talking about the devil, but I believe this is talking about the devil. I still believe the passages in Isaiah 14 and in Ezekiel 28 are talking about the devil, and I can give a whole list of reasons why. There's some qualities of the entities that are described there. Here you have Lucifer, the son of the morning, or more properly, the shining one, the son of the dawn or morning. That didn't call him a morning star, though maybe he was in that kind of a category, because if there were multiple morning stars in Job 38:7, and there are, it's in the plural. So we know there's morning stars, plural. If there were multiple morning stars, what do you think the morning stars would be? Because clearly all the angels aren't morning stars. So what do you think a morning star would be among the angels? Now you just have to use some logic, because the Bible doesn't tell you. It does tell you Jesus is the bright and morning star. And then it tells you there were a plurality of morning stars that sang together, which means there had to be at least two of them. There might have been more than two. But you can't have a plurality of beings called morning stars singing together without there being more than one, right? So just using logic, what do you think that category could be? The first of the angels created, perhaps. Because a morning star is the first star that comes up, the first star you see. And angels are called stars in the Bible. It's not a lot. In fact, you might be surprised by this. People are referred to as stars more than angels are symbolically. But angels can be referred to as stars. And certainly they're referred to as stars here for a really simple reason. There's a whole lot more in this verse than meets the eye, so don't let me leave this verse before I explain it to you. But what's the context? What's the context of this chapter? Before this statement, somebody give me a couple of verses before it.
I'll start in verse 1. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind.
What's going on up to this point, as you know, it was a back and forth. The first two chapters are a story about something that occurred. Then we get into the discussion back and forth between Job and his three comfortless comforters, Bildad, Zophar, and Eliphaz, his three unfriendly friends, as I sometimes call them. They were his friends, but they weren't very nice friends. If you're suffering like that, that's the last three jokers you want showing up. They spent the entire time trying to tell Job the reasons why he was suffering that were his fault. Not God might be testing you because you're such a righteous man. The vast majority of what they were saying was, if you read between the lines, it's pretty rough stuff. There's a reason Job had to say, these eyeballs are fastened on my wife. I don't have eyes for anybody else. There's a reason. It's because they were inferring all kinds of crazy reasons for why he was suffering. Maybe he wasn't faithful to his wife. Who knows what's going on with him? So that goes on for around 30 chapters of abuse before you get to Elihu, a powerful, apparently young man, much younger than Bildad, Zophar, and Eliphaz, who then starts preaching. And it looks like correcting not necessarily the theology of what those men had said, because there really wasn't anything in their theology that was the issue. It was what motivations they were attributing to Job. Some people get upset with their theology because there's some statements made, I think it's Eliphaz, isn't it, that says a couple of times about the heavens were not clean in his sight. And then he talks about, look, if there's uncleanness among the angels, how much less would he trust men who come from the dust, which means it has to be some other than men he's talking about. So some have said, well, bless the Lord, Brother Bear. or whoever they're talking to or arguing with. I'm not going to throw anyone else on the bus, brother, whoever. Bless the Lord. Those guys had no idea what they were talking about. You can't trust anything Bildad, Zophar, and Eliphaz said. That's a nice, easy way to get out of jail free card, because I can read through Bildad, Zophar, and Eliphaz's theological statements, and I guarantee we're going to agree with all of them. None of them are crazy statements about God. They all are things that are all true about God. So just this one little thing you don't like because it contradicts your view, that they lied about. Well, they say, well, later, bless the Lord. I would say bless the Lord to soften this, all right? Bless the Lord, Brother Bear, whatever. You know God rebuked Bildad, Zophar, and Eliphaz. He said they didn't speak correctly concerning him, concerning his reasons for persecuting Job. You go read through what they said about God and see if it sounds like the rest of the Bible. It sounds exactly like the rest of the Bible. They weren't saying false doctrine about God. It's that they were attributing God's actions towards Job to causes that were incorrect. I guess we're going to be talking about angels and the devil tonight. So I was building the case up to Brother Isaiah reading where now God answers out of the whirlwind. So there's a couple things that happened. After Elihu spoke, it was a moment of silence in heaven. Not quite like Revelation 7, but a moment of silence in heaven. And God then spoke. By the way, God never rebuked a single thing Elihu said. He said nothing negative about Elihu. Tells you something right there. And if you read what Elihu said, Elihu's focus is not on Job's crimes against God. It's on God's righteousness and justice. Is that God has a right to do what God wants to do. And God knows better than you. Amen. That's basically Elihu's message, as well as you men have mistreated this man. He was right about that too. And he said some things that would cause you to have a heated fight. They look real gentle in the King James Version. They weren't gentle. He basically told those men, you've been speaking like fools. Wisdom does not always come from the elderly, is basically what he said to them, which is a blunt statement. The fact that you're older than me doesn't mean you're wiser. You said some really foolish things. God doesn't rebuke that. God immediately starts speaking. A whirlwind comes, and here's where Brother Isaiah started. And God now answers. Go ahead.
Who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up now thy loins like a man.
Now you know who he's speaking to. He's not talking to Elihu. That Elihu just darkened counsel. He's not talking to Bildad, Zophar, and Eliphaz. He's talking to Job. Because Job had been complaining, and Job had been doing, to a degree, the very thing. Now, look, I love Job, and you know God loved him. He put him up, Ezekiel 14, twice, he put him up there in the three highest men he could name in terms of righteousness. Noah, Daniel, and Job. 2 different times in Ezekiel 14, he said, they're the ones in a wicked generation that would be living a hallmark life of holiness. But Job didn't do everything right in terms of his spirit wasn't always right, but whose would be in the suffering he was going through? So I'm not critiquing him. But God did. Job's friends were attributing everything to Job, which wasn't the case. You could see Job was a righteous man. It wasn't that Job had done something that deserved this. Job was trying to blame it on God. He even, at one point, even said, it'd be better if you hadn't even let me be born. So to Job, it's on you, Lord. So God was telling him, you don't know what I know. We're going to read the next few verses, which is the context. He goes to what is probably one of the most beautiful passages in the Bible about the original creation, which I would advise you probably not try to put yourself in God's shoes and think of yourself as God. But if you were God and you were wanting to answer somebody and tell them how much more insight you have than they do, that'd be a nice place to start. Well, nice, I don't know if it's nice, but that'd be one place you could start. Were you there? Do you know why I've done the things I've done since the beginning of the creation? All of it has a reason. Doesn't mean he planned it all to happen the way it did, but everything God did had reason and purpose. That doesn't mean everything man did was according to God's reason and purpose, but everything God did before man's fall, during man's fall, and after man's fall were tactical and strategic things to get his will accomplished. So he goes back, as you're going to hear in a moment here, and Brother Noel reads a few more verses. He goes back all the way to the beginning of the creation. So, gird up now thy loins like a man, for I will demand of thee, and answer thou me. Now he's going to ask Job some questions.
Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth?
All right, here's the beginning. Where were you at? That's a pretty rough thing to hear. Where were you at when I laid the foundations of the earth? Now, this is important. It's the whole reason I'm telling you to read this. When he laid the foundations of the earth, which, by the way, he's going to give you more details on if you aren't sure about the time period, what human being was there to watch it? When he laid the foundations of the earth, were there any human beings alive when he laid the foundations of the earth? No. Why? How do we know that? Bible, Bible, Bible. How do we know? Well, everybody here knows the answer to that. Come on. You don't need to be shy about it. How do you know there were no humans? When did he lay the foundation? Well, if you're not sure when that was, if you go to Genesis 1, you notice that the earth was without form and void. Darkness was upon the face of the deep. So maybe the foundations of the earth had already been laid at that point when the earth was sitting there formlessly. So the foundations of the earth could have been laid even before the earth was without form and void, couldn't it? But once he starts dividing things, that's definitely the foundation. But I think the foundations might have been before that. So why would no humans have seen this? And this is really important. Get this question right. Why would no humans have seen this? Thank you, Sister Claudia. Adam and Eve weren't created till the sixth day. There weren't even any animals alive to see this when God laid the foundations of the earth. And by the way, the next verses will give you a big clue that that's probably the very beginning of Genesis 1, not before Genesis 1, because you're going to start seeing the elements of the sea being dealt with, where he's separating the land from the waters in the next few statements. So why is it that I am making such a point about when this occurred that God is referring to? Why am I spending so much time that we're going to read these verses? Why is it so important to establish the time frame that this occurred? Remember what verse we started with in this 38th chapter. It's 3 verses later. Notice that verse, we're going to read the next couple, but notice that verse says, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Meaning it's connective to what just went before, right? Meaning whatever's going to happen in these verses is the time when the morning stars sang together. So as we read these next few verses and we establish, as I think we're going to be able to do, that there were not any human beings at this time yet, the morning stars and sons of God have to be angels. You see why I'm going through it the way I am? And the reason I do that, going through it piece by piece, just taking it apart, when you're done, there's an ironclad argument. You cannot escape. And it's all biblical. That's the goal. The goal is when you go through these points is there's no way out to some other conclusion when you're done. Brother Ferris, go on.
Proverbs 8, the same thing, when there were no depths, I was brought up. Before the
Just
mountains
lately.
were settled.
Talking about Jesus.
While as yet he had not made the earth, nor the fields, nor the highest parts, the dust of the world.
Okay, now that would be very likely, well, we know it is, before what we're hearing in Job 38.
Right.
Because before he even started creating the earth, there certainly weren't any foundations. There's where Jesus is the beginning. He is the beginning. I heard a gospel song the other day called The Beginning of the Beginning. I hadn't heard that one before. It's talking about Jesus was the beginning of the beginning, which I won't explain it all to you. It was kind of an interesting take they had. But he was the beginning of the beginning. When God started, the first thing he started with was Jesus because nothing was done without him. Those passages in places like John 1 are talking about this creation. None of this came about without Jesus' involvement. He was the agent. God was the architect. That's a very good verse to bring in. That lets you know where Jesus was at.
Yes.
Which, by the way, if he is the bright morning star, if that is intended to mean the same thing as these morning stars, he would have had to be there when the earth's foundation was laid because he was there before it, what you just read.
He was
Created. That's right. All right, so go ahead, Brother Isaiah.
Declare, if thou hast understanding. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched a line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened?
Talking about the structure of the earth. Very poetically, because of course they wouldn't have understood this from some scientific standpoint. Any words God would have used wouldn't be words we invented later. So this may be talking about all the aspects of what God did to create the lines of force, even of gravity and other things that were affecting the earth and the universe. One thing that's in here that you're going to see is the tidal pull, the tide pull between the moon and the earth, and other things that God established at that time.
Or who laid the cornerstone thereof? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy.
Okay. For the sake of context, read at least one or two more verses after that.
Or who shut up the sea with doors?
Okay? Here's the tidal pools right here. Because what causes the sea to go in and to go out and be controlled in its flow? It's all that pull, the gravity and the tidal pull and the moon, and there's so much into it that I'm not going to explain scientifically here.
When it brake forth, as if it had issued out of the womb.
It is amazing when you watch the tide come in. It's like, where did that come from? The sea's been there this whole time. Where's all this water come? See, that's what he's describing in extremely poetic terms. He's describing the very beginning of the creation, from the foundation of the creation to the waters. Now, here's where I think we're moving into the dividing of the water from the land, because that's created by some of those pools.
When I made the cloud, the garment thereof, and the thick darkness, a swaddling band for it. And I break up for it my decreed place, and set bars and doors, and said, Hitherto shalt thou come, but no further, and here shall thou, proud waves, be stayed.
That'd probably be far enough. We can go on, but it really gives you the context, doesn't it, of that statement in the 7th verse. This is right back to what the last part Brother Noel read, is right back to the point I was saying about gravity and the pull between the moon and the earth and all the things that affect the tides and other things. That's literally what's being talked about here. What stops the proud waves? What stops them from coming in further to the land? All of it is designed by God. And this is before the flood of Noah. All of this was designed by God, this incredible architecture of the creation. So if in the middle of that passage, we have a statement that says that when all this was going on, and by the way, it tells you when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy is connected to the events before that verse, isn't it? It's talking about the foundation of the earth being laid, and it says when the morning stars sang together. There is no escaping the conclusion that the morning stars and the sons of God had to be angels, had to be celestial beings, because there were no human beings when God laid the foundations of the earth. Like I said, you go on past this statement and you're into him separating the land from the water and all those forces being put into play that are still prior to the human creation, aren't they? They're some of the very first things God did, was separate the land and the sea and create these forces, even the clouds and the other things that he put into place. So the 7th verse is tucked into the middle of the creation account, meaning whoever these beings are that are being referred to morning stars and sons of God, and I think that's two groups. I think the morning stars are sons of God, but I think the sons of God is the larger group. I think all celestial beings that were alive at that time would be considered sons of God. But I think the morning stars are a different class of the sons of God. I have nothing more than logic to affirm this because, again, the only place you're going to find that kind of language anywhere else, we can come back to Isaiah 14 and touch on that again, but the only place you're going to find language exactly like that is in Revelation, talking about Jesus being the bright morning star, the root and the offspring of David, the bright morning star. So, one star, oh, that's good, Brother Knowles. Brother Knowles is quoting now in the 15th chapter of 1 Corinthians, where it is talking about bodies celestial and bodies terrestrial, and it's talking about the nature of how things work. It says, one star differeth from another in glory. Now, that could be talking just about the natural heavens, that some stars out in the heavens are bigger than others, they're brighter to our eyes than others. But the context of those statements, even though it's talking about the sun and the moon and other things, seems to be deeper than just the natural. So if that statement in 1 Corinthians 15:41 is talking about angels differing from one another, but I do think they differ from one another. That's a very good verse to bring in. Some might argue that's just talking about natural stars, but there's more evidence than that. Principalities, powers. You realize principalities and powers are associated with something that is not in the natural realm. Of course, since we're touching on angels and the doctrine of the devil tonight, this is one that certainly is, well, it won't push buttons. We've talked about 1,000 times among the ministers. There's nothing controversial about something we talked about 1,000 times. But there will be some listening who are not going to agree with this. But when I read Ephesians 6, right before you get into the armor of God, when it's talking about put on the whole armor of God, it tells you why you need the whole armor of God. Is the armor of God natural or spiritual armor? Faith isn't something I can go buy at the metallurgy, some smith make for me. Factory made, you know. I suppose it would be nice if that's all you had to do is go buy it somewhere. Problem is, I can tell you right now, the faith costs a lot. You're going to give your whole life for that. And then you only have one piece of the armor. Every one of those pieces will cost everything. It'll cost you sometimes believing against belief, hoping against hope, as it said about Abraham. Sometimes when it's like, I'm just going to have faith. I'm going to hold this breastplate. It's not the breastplate of faith, breastplate of righteousness, the shield of faith, forgive me. I'm going to hold this shield of faith when it's hard to have faith. I'm going to hold this shield of faith when I'm not sure where God's even at. So trying to have faith in him to protect me, I'm going to hold on to my belief in him as my protection. That's one of the mysterious things about our Christian faith, is that faith is an invisible thing that you're expecting to protect you. It's a shield, but it's not a shield like a natural shield where if something's coming at you, you just lift it up and deflect it. It's a shield you have to count on really working even though you can't see it. And the stronger your faith is, the more powerful that shield will be to deflect the darts of the devil or of any other kind of darts, because I do believe that the darts that come from the devil are not the only darts. There's human beings that are trying their best to destroy us. What's coming against the shield of faith is not something in your brain. Your brain can affect the shield of faith. It can weaken your shield of faith. But those darts and other things are coming from somewhere outside of you, aren't they? Isn't that the whole description? The whole description in the armor of God are things from without. Now, things from within affect the armor because what's going on within you will determine the strength of the armor, or even if you have the piece of armor. If you don't have any faith, you don't have a shield of faith. If you're losing your faith, if your faith is waning, your shield won't be strong enough. You know, there's all kinds of different shields all throughout the history of warfare. There's periods in time where the only shields they had were wood shields. And once they started to get bows like the English longbow or crossbows, some of those could pierce right through that shield. If you're holding it, it gets through, it could still hit you. And certainly once we get parabellum level ammunition and other things like that have high speed ammunition, shield is not going to stop that. You got to have very specific armor to stop a bullet of some kind. So your shield of faith has to get stronger. That's the interior part. The interior part is getting the weapons and armor and taking care of them. You know, you can have a sword that if you don't take care of it, if you don't keep it oiled, if you don't keep it sharpened, it will dull and it'll rust, especially real. That's how you know the difference, by the way, between an actual genuine sword and some 440 steel or whatever it is they make a lot of these swords out of now that look real pretty. They're shiny. They're mirror finish on those things. I can promise you, you're very seldom going to see mirror finish on the real thing. Especially if it's like a high-grade steel that they folded and folded and folded. You'll see the ripple marks and other things that let you know that. But you won't see that mirror finish. That's a cheap steel. When I was growing up, I was so wrapped up. I was telling Brother Aaron this the other day. I said, Brother Moore talks about the computer industry and how for a long time, when we started to get certain technologies, I was hoping you'd get them. I thought, this software is really something. It took Brother Moore a little longer time to want to accept it because that was his... Forgive me for the word, but I think you've even said it this way. That was his addiction. He loved technology and studying it and the computer sciences he was involved in. That's how I was with combat arts and martial arts. I told Aaron the other day, so I'd love to teach my kids some of the things that I know because I haven't lost them. They're still there. But it's like all consuming. Once you get in that mindset of training like that, it takes over for me. It may not for you. So I have to balance out, even how I'm working out, that I'm not making that too much of an object like somebody that's their whole life, But when I was growing up, we loved all those martial arts weapons. You go down to the martial arts store and get a katana or something, I can guarantee you it's a piece of junk, no matter how pretty it looked, because you're not going to pay less than hundreds and hundreds of dollars for something that's actually a hand-forged katana. Those are very expensive. People be out there trying to hit a watermelon or something. The watermelon might break that sword. The real thing, though, you'd be amazed what the real thing can do. It's like cutting like a knife through butter with the real thing. But it has to be taken care of. So does your armor and shield. Your armor and armaments. Because really what's in the list of the armor of God is not just armor, it's armaments. There's a sword in there, isn't there? Sword's not armor, it's an armament. It's arms and armor. But talking about the armor of God, it said, we wrestle not. This to me is an open and shut statement. I don't really see how you can wiggle out of this and take everything else into consideration. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. If somebody said to you, there's a battle, but we won't be wrestling against flesh and blood, what would you conclude? Brother Eric, you're smiling. Tell me what you conclude. You're wrestling against something that's not flesh and blood. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, which means what I'm about to tell you about is not a battle with other human beings. And you're a human being, This is flesh and blood. So if I say I'm not wrestling against flesh and blood, I'm not talking about fighting my carnal nature. That's part of my flesh and blood. That's part of me. I'm not talking about other human beings. I'm talking about things in the supernatural realm. Now, by the way, it's bigger than just what we might think of as celestial entities that might have some kind of malicious intent. It's ideas too, but it's not just ideas. Because some of these things that are described here are titles for entities, principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness of this world and spiritual wickedness in high places. Now that whole list is in contrast with flesh and blood. It's not flesh and blood. It's something other than flesh and blood. And thus, the things that we're trying to armor ourselves with, yes, they will help us resist what's going on in our own mind, but what's going on in your mind is going to determine whether or not you have the arms and armor, and it's going to determine whether or not you're keeping up the arms and armor, whether or not it's getting stronger or it's losing its integrity in terms of its structural integrity or whatever, because that does go on in our mind. Your shield of faith is entirely dependent on what's going on between your ears. Now, it can help when we have some services like we've been having Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, and we keep hitting it. I keep telling Heath this. I don't know how many times I've said this to you, Heath. You could tell me maybe. It might have been 20, 30 times now. I said, I don't know how we're going further than we just went this weekend. And then the next weekend we do it. And then I'm like, this can be a heavy feeling. Brother and Sister Smith are coming in. Sister Smith's in dire condition. They're going to be going to the hospital, and the expectation is we're going to be in a deep place of prayer. God just hit that thing and moved on. Glory. Praise His holy name. That's what's going on right now. We are shifting into another level of God's operation. Amen. And the reason I know we're shifting into another level, and it's not just the normal roller coaster effect of the waxing and waning of the power of the way God works with the church, is because it's been consistent. It hasn't been a roller coaster. We've come up and we haven't gone back down. And really, it doesn't coast either. It just keeps incrementally inching up. And sometimes, like the last weekend or so, it takes a huge leap forward. We need that power because we do have things we need for ourselves. We do have things outside of us. I believe they're in the supernatural realm. I believe they're in the natural realm. We have enemies all about us and within us. I prayed that prayer the whole time. I still pray it fairly regularly. It's just a quote of a scripture. A lot of times, the best prayers are just quoting scripture, because some of the most powerful prayers in the world are in the Bible. Many of the Psalms are that way. I prayed that prayer, I think I've told you this, every single night before I went to bed, and all through the day I was praying this prayer. I just kept praying the prayer, unto Thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. Oh my God, I trust in Thee. Let me not be ashamed. Let not my enemies triumph over me. I was praying that every single day. But it was deeper than the enemy of cancer that I was praying about. There's enemies, I believe, in Ephesians 6 that are not me. But the enemy I was most worried about is me. I didn't want to lose my faith. I didn't want to lose my trust in the Lord. I didn't want to lose my relationship with the Lord. And every single time I prayed that prayer, I literally took my hands over myself like this when I prayed it. And I was praying it and saying, let not mine enemies, and I'd say within me or without me, whether it's the enemy of cancer, whether it's the enemy of my own carnal nature, whether it's the enemy of my own heart that might be deceitful, and I don't think it's desperately wicked anymore, I would hope. After all this time we've been serving the Lord, look, I know that Calvinists love to cling on to these ideas that man is just desperately wicked and you can never be good. You are defaming half the people in the Bible who God calls good and righteous and holy people. The heart starts out as desperately wicked, but it doesn't have to stay that way. If we've been serving the Lord for a while and the Spirit of God and the Word of God has been working on us, we certainly shouldn't be desperately wicked anymore. There's things our heart can deceive us, and there's evil still in there to be overcome, but desperately wicked? Surely we've come further than that. But I was telling the Lord, please don't let anything within me triumph over me. I didn't want the cancer to triumph over me, but when I prayed that prayer, I was far more concerned with something in my heart being overwhelmed by it. That I would get into some dark place in terms of depression or lose my faith or lose my love for the Lord or feel like He didn't love me. You may still love Him, but you think He doesn't love me. And so I didn't want those enemies to triumph over me, but we've got a lot of enemies. This isn't the only enemy. This is just our worst. But there's not just spiritual wickedness in high places in politics or in false religion. Oh, there certainly is. But that's flesh and blood, isn't it? Aren't the leaders of false churches flesh and blood, or are they supernatural? So the moment you say that this is not against flesh and blood, you know whatever's coming next is something more than the natural, it's supernatural.